Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday, the Wednesday after Memorial Day, and I was in Michigan this weekend with my family. It was really good to see them, but it was also nice to be back home. So Wednesdays are, as we all know, ladies' days here. We learn about a lady in the Bible and what her story can teach us. And today we are going to learn about a woman in the Old Testament whose name was Abigail. Abigail. So our timeline for our story today is the Old Testament, like I said earlier, and the time of our story takes place between when David killed Goliath and when he became king. So it was after he killed Goliath, but before he became king of Israel. So during that time. Well, what was happening during this time in the country, in the surrounding areas? Remember the friendship between Jonathan and David, and how King Saul, who was king at this time, was trying to kill David. He was hunting him down and trying to kill him because he knew that David was going to be the next king. So, let me get rid of that. So, King Saul sought to kill him every chance he could get. David was running from King Saul, running for his very life, and running from place to place in the wilderness and in the desert areas, with 600 men in the desert, different areas of the desert, different places. They have to be on guard at all times because King Saul is looking for him and for his army. And so they need food, they need shelter, they don't have a permanent place to live all the time. So it's just kind of up in the air, and it's kind of, I bet, nerve-wracking, right, for he and his men. So it's kind of horrible. And sometimes they had to shelter in caves to get away from Saul and to hide from Saul. Terrible places, caves where there's, who knows what's living in there, and it's dark and yucky. And so anyway, it wasn't like David was living in the palace and living in comfort or even living in a house. He was kind of out on his own, homeless. He was homeless. He and his 600 men. So, in the Bible, if you read Psalms, there are so many Psalms that are discussing what it's like to live in hardship, what it's like to live scared, afraid of people who are trying to hunt you down and kill you. If you read Psalm 91, for example, this is David talking about what it's like to have these feelings of kind of dread and things like that, being hunted. I'm just going to read to you a couple verses from Psalm 91, what David is saying here after Saul's trying to hunt him down and kill him. And he says, this is David talking, he says, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him will I trust." David knew what hardship was. He knew what it was like to be fearful and have to just trust in the Lord for his well-being. So whenever you're feeling like David did, you can always turn to the Psalms, and he understood, man. He knew exactly what it was like. I also want to read to you just a couple chapters over from that, Psalm 88, verse 8. And David says this, "Thou hast put away mine acquaintance far from me. Thou hast made me an abomination unto them. I am shut up, and I cannot come forth." David had to leave behind his family and his friends and run for his very life. He knew what it was like to not have the comforts of home. His best friend, he couldn't hang out with Jonathan, his best friend. He had to leave him. So it was kind of sad. So this is the time period and kind of what was going on at this time. David knew what it was to feel despair and hopelessness he had every reason to, right? He had every reason to feel these way. He killed Goliath, and then he has a jealous king who's his father-in-law who's trying to kill him. So, kind of sad. Anyway, so that's what's happening. David and his mighty men try to really, first of all, stay alive. And they have to go from place to place, like I said. So in this, they have to really try to get along with the inhabitants of whatever area they're starting to live in. It's best to get along with people and not cause problems and draw attention to yourself so that people know where you're at. So there would be certain people who would try to bully people who lived out in the wilderness areas and steal their land and their cattle and things like that. So David, he's pretty smart. He decides that he and his men are going to kind of look after the people of this one wilderness area that they were living in. Kind of look after them and make sure nothing bad happened to them. So there's this super rich guy in this area. He owns a ton of land. He has a ton of money. He's got lots of, cattle and sheep and stuff and servants. And this rich man's name was Nabal, or Nabal, sometimes people call him. David has been looking after Nabal's cattle, his servants in this area. They have been making sure that bad guys that lived around in that area didn't mess with them, didn't steal their cattle and things like that. They haven't asked for anything. They've just been, looking after them. So David sends a few of his guys to go and talk to some of Nabal's servants. And this happened out in the field. So David's men, a handful of them, go to talk to Nabal, actually. He sends his servants to go and talk to Nabal. And it was sheep shearing time, by the way. That's when they would take all their sheep and they would shear all the wool off of them and they would sell their wool. So it's that time of year. So it's a time of celebration. Festivities are going on. They're excited for the sheep shearing because they can sell all of that wool and get money. And Nabal had thousands of sheep. And so when you have thousands of sheep and you go to sell all that wool, that makes a good amount of money for you. So that's why he was so rich. He has just, cattle was everything then. If you had a ton of cattle, you were probably pretty wealthy. So anyway, it's a celebratory time, and because they could sell all that stuff and get money for it. So David has his servants go and check in with Nabal, and they ask him, hey, since me and my men have kind of been keeping all of your servants and all of your flocks safe, and we haven't asked for anything, we haven't taken any of your sheep for ourselves, we've just been protecting them out in the fields. Since we've been doing that, can you please give us, David's men, some food and some help? Because, we're running for our lives. We don't have a source of income. We don't have food. We kind of have to do for ourselves. And you have all of this cattle and we've been protecting them. Can you please give us some of the cattle so that we can have something to eat? It's only right. And can you do that for us? We didn't take any of your sheep. We didn't hurt any of your guys. We're just hungry, okay? We're hungry. So these 10 guys bring this proposition to Nabal. And David, in doing this, came to Nabal with a very humble and a very kind attitude. He wasn't assuming that, Nabal was just going to give him all of his stuff. He just asked for a little bit because they were hungry. So Nabal answers David's servants. And you know what he says? Nabal says to David's servants, who's David? Who's he? Are you kidding me? And he asks these guys, I'm not David's servant. What's the deal? Why are you even coming to me and asking me this stuff? Should I take food and stuff that's supposed to be from my own servants and give it to strangers that I don't even know? I don't think so. So who's David? I don't even know who you're talking about. Not my problem. Be gone. I'm not helping you. So these 10 guys go back and they tell David that Nabal is a rude and foolish man who has zero respect for David. They tell David exactly what Nabal said and how he said it. And first of all, this is the problem. Number one, everybody knows who David is. Okay, everybody knows. He killed Goliath. He won a huge war for Israel. He married a princess. He's King Saul's son-in-law. He's a mighty warrior. He's famous. Songs have been written about David. The fact that Nabal said, "Who's David?" that just tells you what kind of person Nabal is. He knew exactly who David was, and he did not care. No respect at all. Number two, David and his men have been good to this man. They haven't been rude to him. They have been protecting Nabal's investment and his property, and they did not deserve this kind of response. So David responds to Nabal's answer by saying to his men, "Gear up, we're going to go kill Nabal and all the men in his household, and we're going to take what we want." So that, first of all, that's not a really good reaction, okay? That's an angry reaction. It's the equivalent of like, "Oh no, you didn't." So we've got some drama. Now, on to the topic of our discussion today, Abigail. Who is she? Abigail is Nabal's wife, okay? Do you think she's good or do you think she's bad? Let's see what it says. 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 3 says, "Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife, Abigail. And she was a woman of good understanding and of a beautiful countenance. But the man was churlish and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb." So the Bible says that Abigail was Nabal's wife, that she was smart, and that she was pretty. It says she was wise and of a beautiful countenance. She was nice to look at, okay? She wasn't some ugly woman. So we are going to, based on what we read about pretty soon, we're going to also understand that she's probably very respected from her household, and she's very discerning. She's really smart. A servant of Nabal's overhears what Nabal said to David's servants, and he hurries and he tells Abigail what happened. So she hears what her husband has said. Okay, she knows who David is. She knows about David's reputation. She knows exactly what's going to happen from what Nabal said to David. Very quickly about Abigail, okay, she was a woman, okay? Why would the servant go to her? We all know that back in this time, women were like property, kind of. They weren't really that respected. But the servant went to Abigail. Why? The Bible says that the servant knew, it was well known, that Nabal was like a moron, okay? He was odious and foolish and wouldn't listen to what anybody ever said to him. Very stubborn and just not respected in his house. He was rich but not respected. He didn't treat people well. So that's the reason they went to her. I think she was well known by the servants as a person who kept trouble out of the household, okay? When the man of the house isn't doing what he's supposed to be doing, people find a way to go around him and go to the wife to try and get things done. That happens sometimes. Nabal is a fool, and she is kind of the person who runs interference for his stupid things that he does. So for his behavior. So the servant tells her so that she can act, okay? So she knows who David is. She knows David's reputation. She knows that David is going to come and kill everybody in her household and take all of their stuff. So this is what she does. She gathers 200 loaves of bread. She gathers wine, more like grape juice back then. She gathers 5 cooked sheep, corn, raisins, figs, and she packed all of these donkeys, loaded up all these donkeys with all of this food. And she tells her servants to head out with these donkeys and all this food toward where David and his army are, because they're coming. David's army is on its way to Nabal's to kill everybody. So she sends the servants and the food out ahead of her and says, I will join you. I will be behind you. She follows. She keeps this all a secret from her husband. She does not tell Nabal what she's doing. So Nabal has no idea that she's done all of this. She sees David. She gets off of her donkey, and what does she do? She falls at his feet and begs him to overlook what her husband did. And this is what she says. She says, David, or she probably calls him my lord, I will take Nabal's punishment. I will take it upon myself. My husband is a foolish man. Blame me, okay? Don't blame my whole household. Don't kill everybody in my house. If somebody has to be punished for this, punish me. I didn't know your men came and asked Nabal for help. I didn't know. So she talks to David about it. It's kind of this long discussion. And then at the end, she says to David, since I have actually kept you from committing murder, please forgive this whole thing of my husband. God has chosen you, David, to rule over all of us. So please forgive this indiscretion. David looks at her and kind of respects what she does, and he blesses her for her thoughtfulness and her wisdom. And yes, he even saw that she kept him from murdering everybody in anger. And he realizes that she's very wise. He lets her go home. He keeps everything that she gave him, by the way, because they were hungry. And he promises her that they will have peace from him, and he and his men will not come and kill them. And so they kind of let Abigail go home in peace. And they go on about their way, and she goes home. Nabal is still in the dark, by the way. He has no idea what his wife has done. So Abigail goes home, and she goes to see her husband. But he's kind of busy. You see, Nabal is throwing a humongous party. And the Bible says that the party was a kingly party. It was like, kind of like that party that Artaxerxes threw in the story of Esther. It was a huge bash, okay? And the Bible says that Nabal was very drunk. So she couldn't even talk to him about what she did. So she waits until the next day. The next day, she goes to Nabal, her husband, and she tells him what she did. And how do you think that Nabal reacted? It might surprise you, but he doesn't yell. He doesn't get angry. What happens? Nabal is so utterly shocked at what his wife did that I'm going to tell you what happened, okay? This is in 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 37. And this is what it says. After Abigail told Nabal what she did, it says, it came to pass in the morning when the wine was gone out of Nabal, so he wasn't drunk anymore the next day, his wife told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. And it came to pass 10 days after that the Lord smote Nabal, that he died. Guys, I don't know if Nabal had a stroke or what, but he froze up, and 10 days later, God killed him. He was so shocked at what happened. He was like shocked to death. I don't know. Anyway, so Abigail is now a widow. She is a rich, beautiful widow. So what do you think happens to Abigail after her husband dies? What do you think happens to her? I'm going to read it to you. Verse 39 says, "When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, 'Blessed be the Lord.'" Okay, and then at the end of that verse, it says, "David sent and communed with Abigail to take her to him to wife." So David finds out that Nabal died. He goes to see Abigail and says, listen, I want you to be my wife. So he marries this rich, beautiful widow that was his enemy's wife. The servants came and they tell her that David wants to marry her. She attends to David's servants. She washes their feet, and she goes and she marries David. So David gets the girl. Takeaways from this quick lesson today. Number 1, Abigail was concerned not with only herself. She was concerned about the people in her household. Okay, she knew David's reputation, and she knew that her household relied upon Nabal's success and not dying. She took it upon herself to take care of her household. She got out of her comfort zone and she met the needs of others. That could have been easy for her to gather up all that stuff and send it out. She also kept David from making a huge mistake. Okay, she was wise and very discerning. Abigail, number 2, she was smart. She knew how to size people up and act accordingly. She knew how to de-escalate a potential problem situation. This was not an immature woman. Okay, this was a wise and mature married lady. She's probably seen her share of trouble and problems at being Nabal's wife. Okay, she knew how to run a household. Nabal obviously didn't. He spent his time throwing parties and getting drunk and being rude. So, he didn't know it, but he had to rely on his wife for a lot of things. And lastly, she knew how to be humble and she knew how to be kind, and David fell for her. Okay, I bet his men respected her too. So the Bible says that David took her to be his wife. She was wise and discerning, and David was into that. So, ladies, real quick, we'll have a lesson for ladies and a lesson for guys. Ladies, you will find that you can be a huge asset to your husband someday if you are wise and discerning. God gives us special instincts as women to know many, many times when something doesn't sound right, something doesn't look right. He gives us a feeling in our spirit. Girls, we can have huge impacts on our husbands for the good if we would just listen to the Lord and follow his lead. And guys, don't marry a woman who is selfish and who's a dingbat. Okay? Marry a wise young lady, a discerning young lady, one that is humble and kind and is open to be teachable and learning how to size up situations, and so they can give you good advice. There's nothing wrong or unbiblical about listening to wise counsel, even if it is from a female. So realize that God can bless you as a man through your wife by giving her a discerning spirit. So looks fade, okay? Looks fade and stupid is forever. So think long term, okay? A foolish spouse can be a horrible burden, guys. It's the truth. It's the truth. So we will have another lesson tomorrow. I'm not sure about the topic yet, but it's good to see you all here today, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Tune in tonight. I think we're going to have a Zoom meeting for our youth group tonight. So I love you all. I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.